us hang around this town and let one of us say something true. We're just good for nothing. They all forget a boy grown up.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Darker Than Blue. Uh-oh, I think I'm muted. There I am. Welcome everybody to another episode of Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 FM in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. I am Jackie Lukman, and this is the show, Darker Than Blue, where we talk about politics for the people who you just heard Brother Curtis Mayfield say are darker than blue. That's me and you folks. And man, it is hot outside. It is melty. Do you feel like a piece of melted chocolate? I absolutely feel like a melted chocolate Dove bar because I'm sweet, you know. So it is hot outside. We are in a hot time in this city. The world is practically on fire. And I'm not sure how we can celebrate anything right now with everything going on. As you know, dear friends and listeners and viewers, America is celebrating the 250th anniversary of whatever it is. And people are planning cookouts and all that kind of stuff. But there are groups of people who cannot celebrate any kind of freedom today or in the future. And we're going to talk about that today on Darker Than Blue. And I am so glad to be joined to have this conversation by a good comrade who is doing this work and is going to break all of this down for us today. What is this? The revocation of the temporary protective status for Haitian and Syrian immigrants that the Supreme Court just allowed Trump to yank from those groups of people. And here to explain why this is happening now and what it means in the future and politically, I'm so happy to be joined by Kimberly Miller from the Black Alliance for Peace in Miami. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this massively important topic. And just from my vantage point, being in Miami, the second largest Haitian diaspora in the United States resides in Miami. So this is an issue that's touching a lot of the communities that we care about, really close to home. And I just really wanted to shed some light on it. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. Now, I always like to start from the beginning of a thing because I don't like to assume that people understand what anything means, even though I'm sure people have heard of this. So first, before we do anything else, I would like for you to tell people what you do and why this is so important for you as an organizer and as Kim Miller.
Yes. Well, I am the co-coordinator of the Black Alliance for Peace's Haiti Americas team. So Haiti, yes, Haiti for us symbolizes, the first Black Republic, a symbol of Black liberation that centers our Pan-African and Pan-Caribbean organizing, along with anti-imperialism, which we'll get to touch on today in terms of how imperialism shapes a lot of these displaced communities that then look to TPS as a sort of refuge, escaping the kind of U.S. imposed destabilization on their country. So really happy to get into that. And I was just at a People's Assembly in Miami last week with Florida Rising, that is specifically on immigration and seeing next steps around TPS. And we always say we're not governed by fear. We're not going to be governed by fear. And I think that that's really important to remember. So I'm really trying to make sure that we can put an anti-imperialist analysis into our organizing around immigration and TPS, because it's not about shoring up the American exceptionalist mythos, right? It's about understanding how U.S. foreign policy shapes outcomes in these countries, and it drives a lot of displacement.
Absolutely. So Kim, now let's start from the beginning of the thing. What is TPS, or the temporary protection or protective status for immigrants? Explain what that is so people understand what we're talking about is happening here.
Right. So temporary protected status was created in 1990, and it basically is what it says, temporary, allowing certain communities from countries that have been deemed too unsafe in terms of whether it's a natural disaster. I put natural, of course, in scare quotes, because we know that nothing's really natural in terms of how certain countries can respond after a major, event such as an earthquake or a hurricane. All right. It would be civil war, civil conflict, armed conflict. Those are, conditions that would be seen as unsafe. So temporary protected status was basically a way for a humanitarian kind of policy around allowing work authorization, and then it can be renewed depending on the conditions, the political instability of those countries. But it doesn't offer a legal pathway to citizenship. And it doesn't offer a pathway toward permanent residency. So it creates this situation where communities are constantly in a state of precarity around, will their TPS be renewed or revoked, and how the changing the politics of imperialism are maintained no matter what, right? So in the case of Haiti in particular, they were given temporary protected status in 2010, right after the devastating earthquake. And then the DHS would then review it to decide, okay, the conditions in Port-au-Prince, I don't want to say all Haiti, right? Because that's kind of an Orientalist or stigmatizing way to view Haiti. But in terms of the violence in the capital, there's a level 4 travel advisory for United States citizens to not travel to Haiti or Syria, but yet it's apparently safe enough for these communities to be sent back to, right? And it's not addressing those underlying concerns. So that's a rough overview.
That's a really good overview, because I actually learned something that I did not know. And I hope you all who are listening also are learning things that you didn't know about this TPS program. And that is that the TPS designation does not provide a pathway to citizenship. And imperialism is so important in this whole thing, because the reason people are even here under this status is because of what the US government does through its military in these countries. But you also mentioned Syria, because this is not just an issue for Haiti. Now this is an issue for Syria. So can you explain why these particular two countries are being targeted or have had their TPS status revoked at this particular time, starting with Haiti, but then because I think Syria was kind of added, and explaining why Syria is involved in this now too.
Right. So Syria was added on the TPS list in 2012. And as you know, anyone who's been following Syria, it was the site of, sadly, a long proxy and civil war conflict that has caused massive displacement. As well, we know the United States wasn't just a bystander in that conflict as well, occupying the country, bombing the country, sanctions on the country, Caesar Act, which made it so the country couldn't even in terms of the reconstruction after the war, it sanctioned the country so much that they couldn't even build back basically what was lost in a devastating war, right? So in terms of why Syria is being targeted now, we know that that this administration is bipartisan, but there's been a lot of anti-Muslim bias and the ways in which Syrian communities have been targeted under Obama. This, like I said, it's been bipartisan. But the idea that Syria is now safe to go to, a country where last I checked, 90% of the population's in poverty, right? In terms of there's still instability, even in a post-Assad Syria. It's not, everything's all peachy and everything's fine now. Absolutely not. And it's creating a lot of, I think, fear with some communities in Syria, in the United States, that 6,000, I believe, Syrian TPS holders that are going to be affected by this. So.
Yeah, and for people who are listening and watching, shout out to everybody who is listening, by the way, on WPFW 89.3 FM on the radio, but shout out also to everybody watching on Facebook, Instagram, hopefully on Substack. I think the stream is on Substack and Facebook and all of the other socials. Please like and share this stream while you're watching. And if you're listening, please invite your friends, family, your neighbors to come and listen to this important conversation. Because if we're going to be having cookouts celebrating some freedom, we need to understand that everybody ain't free right now. not even us. So what in the world are we celebrating? But let's get to IAT, Kim, because IAT has been in this precarious position along with so many other countries in the Western Hemisphere and in the global South because of US imperialism.
Yeah.
And tell us, you just mentioned the number of Syrians who were able to immigrate here after the U.S. Violent coup in Syria and before with the attacks on the country that the Zionist entity in collusion with the United States carried out, which created that poverty and that instability in Syria that caused people to flee, that set up the situation for the eventual coup. But IAT, that type of situation, the instability in IAT has been going on for literally centuries. So, how many TPS holders of Haitian background are affected by this SCOTUS ruling? You mentioned the maybe 30 or 40,000 Syrians, I think is the estimated number. But how many Haitians are we talking about? And what does this mean politically for IAT as the first independent Black republic in the Western Hemisphere, and the constant attacks upon the country that has kept it unstable and just a place that is difficult for the people who fought for freedom and liberation for Africans, that they can't stay in their own home that they fought for now. Give us an insight into that.
So this TPS ruling affects 350,000 Haitian nationals in this country. Like I said, and we can get into like the labor aspect as well, but these, they're largely in hospitality, healthcare, home health, what I was going to say, construction, agriculture sectors. And just thinking about, again, being in Miami, that's, it's really wild that Haitian labor can be exploited, right? Low wage labor, precarious labor, and yet they make up a bulk of key industries in South Florida, because South Florida is a tourism dependent region. So I just wanted to point out that contradiction. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the history of U.S. policy in Haiti has been, oh gosh, I mean, I'm just gonna go back to, let me see, the first coup of Aristide in 91. Like, if I can go back into decades of the U.S. backing Duvalier and oppressive leaders. But I was thinking about specifically the Haiti's first democratically elected leader faced a military coup. We know that the military was infiltrated by the CIA. Even when Clinton allowed Aristide to come back into power in 95, I believe, he put specific conditionality, like, oh, you have to do this IMF structural adjustment. And that gets into eroding the Haitian state's capacity to provide for its people, because now it's, like I said, serving structural adjustment neoliberal policies, right, that carve out the public sector. So that was occurring in the 90s. And then you have the coup in 2004, right? And then you see the ways in which Haitians have not been able to basically democratically elect a leader since then. And this is so, but again, we know that TPS was not given through this. They were, Reagan and other leaders called Haitian migrants economic migrants, right? So they were just seen as just fleeing their country just because they wanted to flee it, rather than the U.S. has a long history, right, of disparate treatment in terms of how they treat Haitians versus other migrants. So we know that there's anti-Haitianism that's playing out in terms of how these communities are affected. And I don't really have proof of this, but it does seem like this idea of mass deporting hundreds of thousands of Haitians, they want to keep this country a certain demographic, in my opinion. And they we don't want, that's why they keep Haitians in a constant state of precarity around citizenship, to make sure that, they can exploit the labor, but not actually see the Haitian people as human beings that have families, that have, built things here. And instead, it's just seen as, like I said, they're disposable. And I think that that's been an ongoing legacy of U.S. treatment toward Haitians. And it's these communities in particular that are going to be affected now.
Yeah, and aspect of this TPS discussion that I did not know until I, started doing my preparation for this show and this interview is that there are over a dozen countries who have agreements for TPS status for immigrants to be allowed to be in this country under this TPS designation. I mean, there are there, Kim, do you see any efforts being made to revoke the TPS status of immigrants from, say, Afghanistan, Burma or Myanmar, Cameroon, El Salvador, Ethiopia? These are all of the other countries. As I said, right now, I think there are
Mhm.
17 countries, with the exception now of Haiti and Syria, that have been given TPS status for their people to stay here in the United States for a short period or a period of time and not be deported. So, what do you make? And you already sort of answered this question. And we are also seeing ICE raids being carried out against Black and brown looking people because,
Mhm.
let's be real, folks, ICE agents are not asking people really for their documents and checking to see if they're actual, residents, because we know that many people who are residents, who have temporary residential status, who have permanent residential status, and people who are actually already citizens have been detained by ICE and are continuing to be detained by ICE and have been deported to other countries. So when we look at the whole of this current focus on immigration and immigrants in particular, and we look at which immigrants are being targeted by these collective actions, despite other countries having TPS status, that pretty much doesn't mean much of anything when it's a certain type of people who are always going to be targeted, does it?
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I will say, looking for instance at the Trump administration in particular, his first term, he kind of made it his duty that he was kind of done with the whole TPS thing. Like Honduras, for instance, right before he left office, he tried to revoke the status of the TPS status of Honduras, and we know that for Hondurans, they left. I think it was a Hurricane Mitch in 1998. So just looking back in terms of like these communities have been here since like for over 20 years, and then like saying, oh no, we're actually gonna, and we know what happened between 1998 and 2020 in Honduras. The U.S. backed a coup that was under Obama in 2009, and Trump just, I believe, pardoned narco dictator president, but it just kind of shows that the U.S. has these policies that again destabilize the countries, and even if they are granted TPS, that doesn't make them safe in the sense that they're still going to be on the chopping block. Now, I did ask, because I'm still like learning about this myself. I asked, for instance, some of the organizers in Florida Rising around like Ukraine, because I do know that Ukraine also has a TPS, and I was like, is there a disparate treatment in how Ukrainian immigrants are, treated in their precarity versus like brown or black immigrants, for instance? Like I know, for instance, Venezuela, 600,000 TPS holders, and this course is granted, I believe, 2021 through 2023 by the Biden administration, but yet we know the history of U.S. policy in Venezuela, right? So I would say I do think there is going to be like disparate treatment toward Black immigrants than, for instance, Ukrainians, I imagine, but I have to do more research on that. But I do know that Ukraine also has TPS, but the way the Republicans their view, I guess, toward Ukraine, I'm not sure. I think the war's still going on, so but they don't. It doesn't really matter. It just matters the U.S. can continue to have control over populations, and I think that that's, like I said, labor, keeping these people constantly in a state of like, I don't know, I'm afraid to go out. Like that is, I think, the worst of all of this is just the effects it has on people's psyche and people's communities.
Yeah, I don't think you're far off the mark with the analysis of the difference in treatment of the Ukrainian TPS holders
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else from the global South and the Western Hemisphere. I think that's anybody, Stevie Wonder could see that one. I'm pretty sure. So I guess now people are kind of wondering, particularly people who are affected by this, Haitians and Syrians, they're wondering what's next.
Mhm.
Obviously, as folks who saw the our thumbnail, hey, this weekend is America 250 celebrating the 250th anniversary of America and freedom and liberty. And there are almost 400,000 people who are terrified now that their freedom and their liberty is about to be yanked. Well, it has been yanked under their feet. So, we don't know what this administration is going to do. We don't have a crystal ball. So, we're not making prevarications here or predictions. That's the word I'm looking for. Predictions. But what is next for people who are the victims of this Supreme Court ruling? And Kim, what about the Supreme Court and this ruling? Yeah, that's what I want to ask you first. The Supreme
Okay.
Court in this country. What is your take on the reason the Supreme Court ruled in this way? Because I don't know that I remember in my time of paying attention to American politics, I'm not sure that I remember the Supreme Court weighing in on a TPS issue that affected this many people like this. Now, I could be entirely wrong, but I feel like the Supreme Court right now is doing some real extra stuff for a specific reason or for several specific reasons that people may not be paying attention to. And I wonder what your take on that is.
Well, it does seem this court has really been about expanding Trump's executive power in any way, shape, or form. I will say the language in this particular ruling about why they, Amy Coney Barrett, is that her name? Or I don't even think that's her name. She
Yeah,
has
that's her
two
name.
adopted, yes, yes. She has two adopted Haitian children. I mean, that
That's
contradiction
right.
right
She
there,
does.
but and I think it's through the missionaries, right? Like that she, and there's a whole issue with that and how, missionary industrial complex toward Haiti in particular, but not gonna get into that. Some of the language in the writing around why they chose to, basically, I guess strike this down was saying that, oh, we know Trump has said these sensational things about the Haitian people, but that isn't proof that there's a racial animus behind this policy, which is why they upheld it essentially, and which is so striking for me because just knowing how this was in the lower courts handled before, the reason TPS was extended was because they could prove that Trump called Haiti, an S-hole country, and that and the dehumanizing rhetoric toward Haitians has just gotten more extreme, right, with the cats and eating cats and all that. But to imply but saying that, oh well, Haitians actually have played a, and this is in the ruling, Haitians have played a large part into America's history, and they make a, they're a great I guess component of American society, but yet it's for whatever reason they decided that that wasn't a racist comment, therefore it's okay to deport them. And I just like, wow, like this is just interesting that they're even saying this when we know that the language coming out of this, the language, even just the language coming out of this administration has been horrifying, right? So I just thought that was interesting that they were using that to now say that it's okay to deport Haitians. So that's the point I wanted to make specifically around the Supreme Court. And also, I just want to say historically, thinking about this as a dialectical materialist, 1990, the first year TPS is established, that's right around the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, right? A lot of the people escaping, which was El Salvador, was the first country to get TPS. And anyone knows the history of El Salvador would know that the US was not a neutral bystander in their civil war. The US backed military dictatorships. They backed literally everybody bad. The U.S. backed in Latin America in the Cold War. So the fact that this violence existed, right? Who created those conditions? The U.S. absolutely. Whether it's Somalia, whatever, we can go down the list. And I just wanted to highlight that, not forget that point. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That point is incredibly important because, it's very interesting. Very often on this show, I say things like, one of the things we do as organizers that we have to practice and learn to do is explain these kind of almost, well, no, they're not almost hidden. They are hidden. These hidden histories of US imperialism and destabilizing imperialist violence in the countries in the global south and in the rest of the Western hemisphere, where many of the immigrants come from in this country. And we have to explain these connecting issues of US imperialism, interventions, coups, electoral interference, and flat out massacres and these kinds of things that destabilize, and including propping up actual literal narco states. The United States government has absolutely done that. We have to learn how to explain these things to our people as if we are explaining it to our grandmother. This is the way I was kind of taught how to do it. If you can explain it in a way that your grandmother understands it, then you can explain to people how this all works. And before this show, Kim, I have to tell you, and those of you listening and watching, I had a conversation about all of this and everything else that's going on, the genocide in Gaza that's expanding to the West Bank, that is expanding to the south of Lebanon now, the unprovoked attacks, plural, on Iran, the interventions in Venezuela, especially now, what is going on after the earthquake. Now the IOF is in Venezuela, and that's a whole nother. Okay, then of course, what the US is doing to Cuba and connecting it to what we are struggling here. That's the conversation I had with my aunt before this show.
Light work.
Right, because she asked me, "Are you going to watch the fireworks?" And I said, "No, there are Andrews Air Force Base is near here. For the past 2-3 months, there have been military planes flying back and forth from Andrews Air Force Base over this neighborhood. And today, fighter jets flying back and forth over with the puffy clouds coming out, I guess, practicing for tomorrow's festivities." And I explained to my aunt, who I'm just going to say is, my aunt is deaf, so she does not, she is very insulated. She's very, very focused on family and kind of things. So she doesn't pay a lot of attention to the news and what is really going on. So when I explain all of this to her in about an hour, she literally said, "I did not know all of this. How could our government do this? And this is terrifying." That's what my aunt said to me today. And well, I've been thinking about that ever since. And I get the feeling, Kim, that at this moment, when we organizers are doing this work and we realize the convergence of events means something very dire for the world, that focusing on this particular issue for some people may seem like a small thing because of the horror of everything else that is going on. But can you help us understand why this is not a small issue that we should ignore? This is not the potential deportation of 400,000 people back to countries that the US government still has involvement in. Why is this as much of a horror as everything else that is converging at the same time, that we can't just dismiss as, "Oh, this is business as usual, let's have a cookout"?
Well, I mean, you wrote an excellent piece for Black Agenda Report. I just want to say thank you for writing that about the Venezuelan earthquake, and the ways in which that it's being exploited, right, by U.S. empire, Israel. I mean, it's just runs the gamut. But I was going to say that, thinking about how I'm always, no compromise, no retreat, how these struggles domestically affect, struggles abroad. And I was thinking about, for instance, I'm in South Florida. South Florida, Haiti gets these arms trafficked through South Florida because, one, our lax gun laws, and that's something a lot of, I think, people here would understand, like, oh, there's always a mass shooting every other, and like connecting that the US exports arms throughout the Caribbean, and that leads to homicide in their countries. And the gang violence label, it's like, well, where do these people come from? They're just like, they're armed. Haiti isn't an arms manufacturer, right? So somehow the weapons are getting into the country. And there's no discussion about that from the same policy hawks that are saying, oh, get them out of our country. So just understanding how things are connected from a local to a global perspective, I think is really important. And again, the contradiction of why are these countries like Haiti, like Syria, given travel for advisories for US citizens? What makes Americans superior in the sense that our safety would be considered, but then theirs isn't, right? And I think that's kind of the biggest issue I had with Biden's immigration regime. He deported many Haitians, and all while claiming this is right after their president was assassinated, that who knows who was involved in that, but in terms of thinking Haiti isn't quote unquote a safe place, but yet you're still deporting Haitians. And even if he did extend TPS, we mentioned that's, a subset of the Haitian population, but Haitians are still being deported. Haitians are still being targeted, disproportionately detained. And that matters in terms of how we think about ourselves as African people, as Black people. Like you're saying, it's Black people that are being, targeted, right, by the state. And I think that helps us to see how our struggles are interconnected.
Yeah, I'm so glad you landed right there. But real quick, I want to shout out my dad, Cleophas Malone Jr. Hey, Daddy, how are you? I love you so much down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's watching on YouTube. And we do have to take a little station break here, y'all, because it's 31 minutes past the hour. So on this hot and sweaty Friday, engineer extraordinaire, slide us into what you have for the people today.
WPFW continues to celebrate our 50th year with our third benefit concert at the Palisades Hub on Sunday, July 26th from 4 until 6 in the afternoon, including live jazz music by local artists. There will be a performance by Washington pianist Janelle Gill leading a trio with opening set by bassist vocalist Zoe Jorgensen accompanied by guitarist Parker Spears. More information about attending this event is on our homepage, wpfw.org. Help to keep jazz and justice on the air. WPFW, building a better world, one performance at a time.
DC City, the time has come. DC City, for us to be one.
Wow, what a perfect interlude there. The time has come for us to be one. That's absolutely true. If you have just joined, this is Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 FM in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Thank you to all of you who are listening and all of you who are watching on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and maybe hopefully Substack. Thanks so much for joining. And I am joined by Kim Miller down in Miami. It's got to be sweltering in Miami right now. Thank you so much for joining us. We ended before the break talking about this administration, this regime. I love that word for this government because it's appropriate. This regime targeting Black immigrants in particular. Now, Kim, you know that there is an internal kind of nativist Black movement that is celebrating this ruling, that is saying, good, these people have been allowed to come here and take the jobs away from Black people who are in this country who otherwise would have had those jobs if these immigrants from other countries, even though our ancestors all came from the same place, that they believe that these people, that they are disconnected from immigrants of African descent from everywhere else. What is your response to the celebration of the removal of Black immigrants from this country by people who believe that doing so will give them a step up, a foot up, or some kind of relief, or get them closer to, I don't know what they think they're going to get closer to, equality, acceptance in this land of the free and brave and completely dishonest and hypocritical. Let me stop talking before I say something that will get us in trouble. What is your response to that thinking?
Well, interestingly enough, I saw some of those nativist accounts, whose name I shouldn't say, but they were actually praising Clarence Thomas for voting against the 14th Amendment. Like, so like, oh, standing on Black American business. And I was thinking, so yeah, so we're supporting now stripping the 14th Amendment. Like, you don't think that's going to come back toward us? Like, just this idea that like, it's like a scarcity mindset. The idea that there's just a couple scraps and we have to fight amongst ourselves rather than looking specifically at, like I said, what sectors of employment are a lot of immigrant labor, migrant labor put into, right? Low wage labor positions, for instance, Springfield, Ohio, where the notorious cats discourse even started. Haitian TPS holders were actually filling in on manufacturing and warehouse jobs because there's a labor shortage in Springfield, Ohio, as well as the communities devastated by drug addiction and things like that. And that's a whole other policy implication, right? But I think it does point to this kind of contradiction around, well, you can't just say Haitians are lazy, you can't just say this, but when they're working so hard and within actual fields that have been deemed, oh, that's what immigrants do, kind of. And I feel like that's, when it comes to FBA or some of these more nativist, narrow nationalist movements, they're not looking at the wider picture of how capitalism creates this kind of, like I said, underclass, labor precarity, competition. And instead of seeing our struggles aligned, right, it's trying to, like I said, have a scarcity mindset and pit ourselves against our African brothers and sisters, our Black brothers and sisters. And it's just terrible to see that.
Yeah, it really is. And I've had a couple of conversations with people about this over the past couple of days since this ruling has happened. And there was an interesting conversation that I had with one person, and it was a very interesting perspective, and is one that I had not heard very often, that on the face of it had a little bit of logic, but as you just said, in the bigger picture doesn't make sense because there's imperialism on the other end of it, right? So the argument goes that, listen, the protection for deportation, the protection against deportation is temporary, right? Because of some hardship in your country. So the expectation is not that you're supposed to stay here forever. I mean, because after all, the protection against deportation is temporary, which is why you don't have a pathway to citizenship. So this is just the natural end to the thing that they said is temporary.
Right.
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to give the commentary. What do you say to that, Kim?
Well, that was the first comment I got when I condemned this ruling. It's temporary. You know what temporary means? And then I said, yeah, but the U.S. can still have a permanent destabilization plan for Haiti. That's permanent. So that's just how I did that. So they didn't have an answer.
That's
U.S.
the thing.
imperialism that's permanent. Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely the thing that, and listen, I think I don't know what's going on. I'm probably, this might be the middle age thing. I might be going through a midlife crisis, though, even though I'm 10 years past middle age. But I think I am in this particular moment thinking, all right, let's hear your best arguments for why you like all of this stuff. Let me hear why you really think this is going to help you. Because maybe you think this is a good thing because there's more that you don't know than you realize. But I want to be sure. I want to be sure because I don't want to just call people racist. I don't want to just call people MAGA. I want to be sure that people understand what they're agreeing with, what they're celebrating, and why they believe they're going to benefit from it. And I always realize when I try to be, mature and open and hearing what people have to say, all they have is the propaganda about the drain on, here's the thing, the economy that immigrants have, because that's the narrative from the news and that's the narrative from the politicians, or had been from up to this point. Now, of course, the narrative is what it always really has been because, the drain on the economy was the cover. Now, the truth is being told, and you indicated that earlier, Kim, that this regime really does want America to look a certain way,
Right.
right? But people are still stuck on this idea that they have been fed through a lot, even Democratic politicians say that, oh, America is a country of immigrants. And I'd love your input on that phrase right there in a minute. But we've heard Democrats say, yes, America is a nation of immigrants and we're a melting pot, but we do have to control the borders because uncontrolled immigration is a drain on the economy. Why do you think that narrative worked so well? And then, what do you think about this whole America is a nation of immigrants idea?
Right. All right. So I'll start with that. So, thinking about the idea that, U.S. is just a nation of immigrants, I think obscures the settler colonial foundation as well as the settler empire. Because when you get into empire, now you're understanding, oh, the U.S. is an expansionist imperialist power. So once you get into questions around that, it's becoming, oh, well, how did these communities get here, right? Why, communities from West Asia, right, being displaced through decades of intervention, occupation, and war that the U.S. would start, and just thinking, like I said, that's just in the past, 21st century. But talk about, the Cold War, the legacy of the Cold War, and what that means. So I think it's important that we are clear around like what that means when we're a nation of immigrants, a nation that exploited certain racialized communities, right, as well as a settler colonial country that genocided, its indigenous population. So thinking about America 250, what does this mean for Native folks here? And there's it gets to those questions, those deeper questions. Interestingly enough, like I said, I'm right near the alligator Alcatraz that has been closing. But there are indigenous immigrants from Guatemala, right, that have been detained. They were a large sector of the population detained, right? So just understanding that yes, it's on Miccosukee land, right, and they were at key to seeing its closure, but also the resistance inside the actual prison, the concentration camp, that plays a role too. So I'm always thinking about these questions around indigeneity, citizenship, belonging. What does that mean? I'm a descendant of U.S. chattel slavery. So for me, this country symbolizes state terror. I don't really see America as this benevolent force. They didn't give Haitians, like you said, Obama didn't give Haitians tickets out of the benevolence of his heart. We know that Obama, through Hillary Clinton, suppressed Haitian wages, right? So these are definitely not, like I said, altruistic acts. And I think it's important to think about TPS that way. So in terms of like the people that have this view on this kind of like xenophobia and this nativism around, like I said before, certain communities like Chicago is a great example because that's where my family's from. And I was thinking about how some of the critiques of the mayor were that, oh, he's too pro-immigrant. And I was like, that's interesting because it seems like Chicago is a city of divestment, neoliberal policies, and how that gets then projected onto immigrants rather than looking at the actual policies of capitalism that creates, like I said, scarcity for African Americans or Black Americans. And I was just looking at it from that lens too. I think getting people to understand the material dynamic to this and not, like I said, scapegoating migrants is important.
Yeah, I mean, because this regime is just coming right out and saying, look, having all of these immigrants here will, what did that man say? Will dilute or dirty the blood of America. He literally said that. He said that. So it's out in the open now, and the policies have not changed. The way they talk about them has changed. That's it. So the meaning has always been the same. But Kim, I want to ask you, since, listen, we do need jobs. We do need money. We do need, to have a job so we can afford a place to live and afford health care, which we can't even if we have a job. And we do need jobs so that, we can buy our kids the things they need to go to school. So when these nearly 400,000 people are eventually deported, will Black Americans get those jobs, and will the economic fortunes of Black Americans, of Native Black Americans, of foundational Black Americans? Will 400,000 Black Americans get those jobs as soon as those 400,000 Black and brown immigrants are escorted out of this country, Kim?
Well, I think when you get to the heart of it, it's still a white supremacist capitalist country, right? So in terms of where we fall on the labor tier, I mean, we was just seeing how many our unemployment rate is skyrocketed, and that was because of the attacks on the public sector in particular. So again, blaming migrants for this is just, to me, ridiculous, because we're at a precarious state just being Black in this country, right? Like that's the baseline. So understanding that, I think, is important. And again, when you're in a place like where I'm at in Miami, there's certain cities, North Miami, a majority are foreign born. That's just a fact. So in terms of, how we're thinking about, who would be replacing this labor, those people aren't even there. Like, that's the whole point. Like, like the thing is, like, African Americans have been priced out of Miami for quite some time through gentrification, which again is affecting all these communities, right? I think it's important that we see our struggle around those things. What we share is much more than what divides us. I know that sounds kind of like kumbaya, but that's how I view these questions.
No, and no matter how, soft and pablomy it sounds, it's actually true. It's absolutely true. And I want people to understand how things are connected. Now, we're talking about TPS in general, but we've kind of narrowed it down to the thing that everybody is really concerned about, which is, economics and money. For a lot of regular people, this is not an issue of global geopolitics, even though that is what it is. Right? That's what created this. But for a lot of individual people, I certainly understand that they are concerned about their ability to take care of themselves and their families in a capitalist system in which precarity is manufactured.
Yeah.
So we live in a country where right now in this regime has what did they do? They tried to make it harder to take out student loans to go to quote unquote non-professional schools for advanced degrees and certifications like nursing.
Yeah.
So now do you understand why these kinds of issues that you think only affect immigrants actually do affect you? Because if it's more difficult for you to get a student loan to go to school to become a nurse, to fill some of these jobs for it, nurses in hospitals, but also nurses in rehabilitation centers, home health aides, and this kind of thing, then how is it that deporting the people who are doing the jobs now and are being grossly exploited by being underpaid with no benefits, if you can't get a student loan so you can go to school to get that job, or your children can't go to school to get that job, then how is deporting immigrants going to make your life any better? It is not. So, this is a lot for this weekend, but I really wanted to have this conversation today, Kim, because I think that we are, and it's not a think, I think we all, and when I say we, I mean organizers, those of us who have been in these trenches and doing this work and raising these issues for a long time, and the people, not just us, but those who we learned from, our mentors, our elders, and our foremothers and forefathers in this liberation, anti-imperialist, pan-Africanist struggle. This has been what we have been warning that is coming again, because this is not new. So in light of that and understanding this is a weekend for many of our people who, heck, this is the only time we can get a day off to have a cookout. We understand that. So we take advantage of the moments we have when we can relax and celebrate. But right now at this particular time, as we said earlier, multiple genocides going on. The United States is simultaneously, as they are giving arms and more money still to the Zionist entity to wipe out the Palestinian people and steal their land, they're also continuing to help them do the same now in Lebanon. The attacks on Iran continue at the same time that the civil war, or if that's what you want to call it, in the Democratic Republic of Congo is deeply implicated with involvement of the United States and Israel as attacks against the alliance of the Sahel states heat up, as the civil war in Somalia heats up with the backing of the United States, and as we talked about, ICE running rampant, kidnapping our Black, brown, and Muslim brothers and sisters off the streets in this country, as the militarized police are still shooting us down in the streets for things like being accused of stealing some Pampers, even though that did not happen. Or, you understand what I'm saying. I appreciate that people like a good cookout. I do too. I really do. But fireworks and a grilled hot dog and the electric slide on Saturday is not as important as understanding that we are at war. So Kim, you've got the last word here. How do we fight? How do we fight this war and eventually free us all?
Well, I try to, look through short-term and long-term goals. I did want to leave a note because this is something that I learned at the People's Assembly last week. But some of those strategies in terms of not, like I said, mass deportation of, these TPS holders are, I think Ayanna Pressley, who I believe is from Boston, because Boston has the third largest Haitian diaspora. There's apparently a Haiti House caucus in the rep. I didn't even know that, but so she's the co-sponsor of a. I should pay more attention to domestic politics, but no, but she actually
it's kind of hard. It's hard.
Yes, yeah. I'm always looking at the foreign stuff because the U.S. is always in everything. But yeah, she has a bill around that goes to the Senate. So they're saying that there's certain kind of ways that we can still combat this. It's not necessarily a given that they're going to be deported, but there still are strategies and ways through Congress. They are saying, now I don't know about this Congress, but that was what they pointed to. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to say that just so people aren't left with the idea that's like, there's no hope. But yeah, and looking long term, like I said, just seeing how imperialism shapes us. Once we understand that this is imperialist empire and settler colonial in its foundation, we're able to know what the enemy is. Like Miles said, know your enemy. So I think it's important we know what the enemy is. The enemy isn't migrants. The enemy is policies that create and erode sovereignty. And that's what I think is so important that we do in the Black Alliance for Peace and the Haiti Americas team. We're constantly trying to show sovereignty is key and creating a zone of peace. So, understanding the ways in which U.S. exports violence and that shapes these conditions. It's not about stigmatizing a people or pathologizing a people. It's about looking at inward, right? And U.S. policies and institutions. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I just remembered one thing that I forgot to ask you. I'm a big old sports fan, and obviously the World Cup is happening right now. And I don't want to be remiss in making this connection because right now there are people in Atlanta, Seattle, and a couple of other cities right here in Washington, D.C., watching these World Cup matches. Many football fans from around the world were not allowed to come to this country because of the travel bans that were targeted at particularly Muslim countries. So a lot of African fans could not come here. Iranian fans could not come here. And the ones who were able to slide through, or the ones who live here, were assaulted by the monarchist Iranian fans. Like, how do you see these things happening and the way we're responding in this moment where we're literally in the middle of seeing how united the rest of the working class world really is in regard to class struggle, as we're analyzing the way the World Cup is playing out and the politics around that?
All right. Well, that's why we say boycott the U.S., boycott the World Cup, because we don't want to sanitize U.S. policies. FIFA has, they know they banned Russia. They refuse to ban Israel. They give awards to Trump. for excluding a lot of the communities that are actually playing, right? Haiti was obviously historic and they're qualifying after 52 years. There is a travel ban, so the fans couldn't even get to the United States. I mean, these are deep contradictions, and I think it's important that our stance on boycotting the U.S., so that's made a thing. We're actually, happy to be a part of that campaign because this is just outrageous.
It absolutely is. How can people get tapped in? How can people find your work, Kim?
Well, I do have a Facebook now, but I'm mostly too many reactionaries on Facebook. Not saying Twitter is better, but but I'm on Twitter, liberation_BLK. And I'm also on Instagram, Kim Daw. I'm supposed to be Kim Dawn, but we're Kim Daw, and then an underscore. So they can find me there. And trying to publish is not easy in academia. So I'm just trying to get some work out there and keep my anti-imperialist spirit. But I also write, I've sent something for Hood Communists called Caribbean Marxism. So check that out. And yeah, happy to be here.
Yep, your anti-imperialist light shines bright, comrade. Thank you so very much. The future is red, or else we're all going to be dead. Thank you very much, Kim Miller from the Black Alliance for Peace down in Miami, for joining us on this pre-4th of July here on Darker Than Blue on WPFW 89.3 FM. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. Y'all be safe in this heat, please. Keep hydrated, stay out of that sun. If you're going to cook out tomorrow, pour some out for our brothers and sisters in the struggle in the global south. And then Monday morning, get yourself ready to join that struggle too. I'm Jackie Luqman. This is Darker Than Blue. I'm out of time. A luta continua. The struggle continues. But I promise you, we keep having these conversations and doing this work. Victoria Acerta. Victory is certain. Peace. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, that was Jackie, the official show.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Kim. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all of your work.
And, happy to be here.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, great. Peace. I hope you have a nice weekend.
All right. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, comrades, a little bit of cussing today, just teeny bit, because I know I owe y'all some and I haven't done any in a while. Things have been very, very hectic here. Of course, things have been hectic as we have seen the world. We've seen the world. We've seen it. And so now I get to, relax and not be professional and say words that my daddy does not like me saying, but I'm grown. So, and at this point he used to it. I love a good cookout, and I have been to 4th of July cookouts and understanding the contradictions, but the reality for a lot of our people is that these federal holidays are the only day off a lot of us get. And most of us don't actually get the day off because unless a restaurant or a store that has employees is closed on that holiday, who's working behind the counter in a lot of these places, at least in major cities? But the interesting thing is that we also know that this is true for a lot of working class and poor white people in this country. Because, you go to places in this country where there is a very small non-white population, you see poor white people being treated like crap, the way we are treated like crap. You see poor white people working at Dollar General and Family Dollar and working at 2-3 places. In my hometown, there are poor white people, my hometown, Jarrett, Virginia, there are poor white people who work at the Dollar General, they work at the Roses, or they work at the Walmart, and then they work at the casino. Yeah, my little hometown of Jarrett, Virginia, I think I have to look up the population of that town, but there are not enough people in that town for them to have a casino. But them Bamas do. They have built a casino in my hometown, but you see, my hometown is right on 95. So you get all the trucker traffic, and they have all of the, fast food restaurants and the rest stops and whatnot there. So yeah, So there are multiple levels of economic exploitation that is absolutely eviscerating, practically liquidating the working class and the poor in this country. And it's not just Black people, it's poor white people too. So when poor white people or white people in general come onto these channels where you and I are talking about these issues of the economic exploitation of people who look like us and all of this beauty that the Lord gave us, they think we don't know that they're suffering too. So they come onto these platforms where we are talking about these issues and they make their little racist comments, and they don't even understand that we are fighting for their asses too. We're fighting for working class and poor white folks who are being jacked up, bent over, and with no lube by the same system that's doing this to us and the same system that is doing this to immigrants. Smithfield, the meat processing plant, is not far from my hometown. And let me tell you how connected this thing really is. There was a huge struggle at the Smithfield meatpacking plant for years. And I mean like over a decade, because Smithfield would hire Mexican immigrant workers, and they would hire, poor white folks and poor Black folks, and they would separate the workers by race. And the Smithfield plant actually had an internal court system. There was a jail inside the Smithfield plant. At first, you have to know that the Smithfield headquarters, the processing plant, is enormous. It's enormous, and they had their own police force. So when the employees would piss the bosses off, they would lock them up. They would literally lock them up. The police would come and arrest them and put them in jail. So then the workers started to talk to each other. These poor white, these poor Black, and these poor Mexican immigrant workers. And everybody was paid different. The Mexican immigrant workers were paid the absolute least. They were paid far below the federal minimum wage. And this was like 20 years ago, I think, around. I'll have to get the story for you, and tell you this history. Because it is really fascinating what corporations have been allowed to get away with, and what working class and poor white people in this country believe about what people are taking from them. But the actual history and the facts show that it's not us taking nothing from you. It's the people you all are protecting who are telling you that we are your problem. So let me explain. So they paid the Mexican workers the least, and they had the most dangerous jobs, right? They paid the Black workers a little bit more, and they had the same dangerous jobs. And they paid the white workers more, and they had, the less dangerous jobs. But of course, the poor white workers were never paid anywhere what they were, their labor was worth, and being promoted was even difficult for them, especially if they had any kind of good relationship with the Black and Mexican workers. So when it got out that the workers began to organize, particularly the Black and the Mexican workers together, it got out. And then the repression inside Smithfield against the workers was brutal. People were being beaten, people were being locked up, all kinds of stuff was happening. My pastor, or my late pastor, because Graylin Hagler just passed away earlier this year, my pastor and late friend Graylin Hagler went down to Smithfield to help those workers organize, to get better pay, better treatment, and to get rid of the Smithfield police force, court, and jail. Right? That is how deep and but also how close this issue really is. And right now, in my hometown, There are, you can see there are communities of immigrants from Latin America who are, or the global South, who are working in the plants that are still there. There's Smithfield is farther down in North Carolina. It's still there. And they don't have the jail anymore, and they don't have the police force anymore. But there's also Boar's Head meat processing that is around my hometown. There is the Georgia Pacific plant that is around my hometown. There is a foundry and a metal works, I believe, that is still there, and some other industries. And of course, there is the Virginia State Maximum Security Prison in Greensville County, which is the death house, which is literally up the road from my grandmama's house, right? The first execution they had at that prison after they built it and put the people in there, the first execution that Virginia carried out happened on a weekend, on a Friday night that my mom, this was before 1996 when my mom passed. She died in 1996. We were at my grandmother's house, and I believe it was before my mom passed. We were at my grandmother's house. We were sitting around the kitchen table chit chatting like we always did, and the lights flickered. The lights went out, and they came back on, and it happened a couple of times. And all conversation stopped around there. We're like, oh, what the heck is going on? And my grandmother, who is the holiest, most saintliest woman I have ever known in my life, said, "Oh my Lord, those people killed that man." And we were like, what are you talking about? Who killed who? What you mean, grandma? And she explained, well, they built the prison up here. And the prison is where and my grandmother always called it the death house, so that's why I call it the death house. But my grandmother said, but it's the execution chamber. So my grandmother said, yeah, that this is the death house. This is where they're going to kill people in this prison. And he was the first one. They had it in the paper that his execution would happen today. So she shows me the paper, and sure enough, they reported on, and I can't remember the man's name, but the first execution at the Greensville County Maximum Security Prison happened that night that we sat at my grandmother's table, and the lights flickered on and off because the electric chair drained that much power from the electrical grid. And that's a rural area. So this idea that some of our people have, that they can get better treatment, and I actually understand what it is. I hate that they think this. And I really hate that there is no reasoning with a lot of these people. And they are so convinced that if they adopt Americanism, they will be accepted by America, seen as American, and then eventually they will be treated like Americans. That's really all it is. These folks do not really, in their heart of hearts, believe that they are not African. Yes, they act like it, but what it is, and I know that there is also a huge amount of indoctrination, a lack of critical thinking skills, lack of real education on our history in this country, and lack of real education about this country and the way this country operates around the rest of the world. That all goes into it. It absolutely does. But I do think that for a lot of people, maybe the older ones more than the younger ones who believe this foolishness, I do think a lot of it is really desperation. We've tried everything else to get reparations. We've tried everything else to be treated with respect in this country. Okay, let's try this. I think that there's some of that. And when you think it is your last and only hope, yeah, I think you do cling to it like it's the gospel. And I'm probably giving a lot of these folks more credit than they deserve right now. But I also do feel like a part of me feels like we have to do all we can to reach as many of our people as we can. But at the same time, I'm like, y'all ain't gonna keep disrespecting me, us, our history, our forefathers, There's only so many times you gonna tell me Malcolm X ain't shit because his mama was not born here. There's only so many times I'm gonna let you say Marcus Garvey ain't shit because he ain't. There's only so many times I'm gonna put up with that. But I do think it is important to kind of understand where this thinking comes from and why people cling to it like they do. And I think this is, at least the way I see it, one of the reasons that I think this ideology, this ADOS FBA thing, has gotten so big and it is so it's such a big deal now. Um, but I need people to understand that there is no negotiating with terrorists. And we need to realize that that's what these politicians propping up this government is. All of them, every single one of them, with the exception of a handful or two, one or two here and there, who have proven, who have shown that they are absolutely on the people's side. There's not a lot of them. So most of the politicians in Congress and every single president, including y'all's favorite Sunday school Baptist teacher, Jimmy Carter, including y'all's favorite first Black president, as Toni Morrison unfortunately said, Bill Clinton, and especially the actual Black president, Barack Obama, were all equally as evil. That all of these people hate poor people. All of them hate poor people in other countries. Every single one of them are imperialists, and every single one of them are capitalists who will exploit the people at the bottom of the social ladder in order to keep them on the bottom of the economic ladder so that they can all make more money. All of them, every single one of them. And it is, and I have to tell you all, as an organizer, I'm in the process of learning how to be more patient with people as I'm having these conversations, because you know me, it's hard, because I'm gonna cuss at you, you know, and I'm not gonna be sorry about it. But in this battle of ideas, we can't leave any ideas like on the floor for somebody else to just sweep away. We have to engage in these conversations. It's difficult. It is personally uncomfortable, because I don't want to have a conversation with a white person who comes in and says, "Oh, this is the low IQ channel." Oh, I saw that motherfucker. Don't think I didn't. And I understand that there are bots and all that kind of stuff, but you can't dismiss all of these racist comments as computer generated. A lot of these are actual human beings who are sitting there looking at Black people talk about politics, and the first thing they think about is, "Oh, the niggas are whining again." And they make these kind of comments, not understanding that we are talking about capitalist exploitation that probably definitely impacts your ass too. Sitting there in your, let me not say that, that's not nice. I'm trying to be. So I have as much aggravation for the racist white people who dismiss everything Africans say about the exploitation in this system. I have as much antagonism and lack of patience for them as I have for the FBA, ADOS folks. Honestly, sometimes as I have for the folks who are the liberals, the Democrats, the Black Democrats, who, well, you had better vote for Kamala Harris. You didn't vote for Kamala. This is why this is happening. No, this isn't why this is, because not voting for Kamala is not why this is happening. This is happening because you keep voting for one of the two parties whose policies are exactly the same in regard to our exploitation. So for myself, I am still learning, and it is a daily, in my faith tradition, mine, only mine, not yours, Don't give a damn what your faith tradition is, not trying to proselytize. I don't care what you believe, but in my faith tradition, I am told that insofar as it is possible with me, as much as I have it in my control, I should try to get along with people as much as I can. And I take that and I add it to the absolutely Marxist Leninist ideology of a battle of ideas. See, we can't have this conversation. We can't have this battle of ideas if when you come to me and you say some slick shit out your mouth to me, I'm just going to immediately punch you in the throat. That's we can't have a battle of ideas then. I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about anybody else and how they respond. I'm keeping it here. Right? So, in order for me to engage in this battle of ideas in a principled way so that a clear idea can be achieved at, not necessarily if people don't agree, fine, they don't agree. If they come away from the battle of ideas that we have in person, because let me try to be clear. This idea of having a battle of ideas can't be done on social media. I've tried it since 2016 and it don't work. It does not work. That there is no having a real conversation, a real exchange, sitting with the tension in front of each other and being forced to respect each other's humanity because it's sitting right there in front of you. It's kind of hard to dehumanize people when they're sitting in front of you if you have any kind of morals. Now, if you're an amoral monster like, a Zionist, you have no problem doing that. But you and I are human beings. You and I are different people. We are people. We have morals. We have souls. I do think there are some people who probably don't have one. But I don't think we can have this real battle of ideas with this forum. I think this forum is good for exactly this, introducing different ideas to people. Having people look at sitting on YouTube and going, "Oh, I didn't know that was true. Oh, I didn't understand that that's what okay, yeah, that this platform, this medium, social media is good for sharing information. It's good for reaching out to new audiences that you would have never had any contact with before. It's perfect for that. And it's great for that. But we're not going to be able to engage people to understand this system and the ways it is exploiting and killing us all in the same for the same purposes but in different ways. We're not going to be able to get people to understand how that it's really done and to get them to see that we really are connected to each other because our collective enemy is exactly the same. That's hard to get for people to get to through this medium. So this is why organizing outside of social media is so important. It's one thing to have people who are on this platform who are social media commentators, and I am one, but I'm an organizer outside of this. But a lot of other social media commentators, that is all they do. That's all they talk about the issues, but they're not doing anything to think about and work around how to address the issues, how to help people understand the issues, and how to bring people into learning how to fight to change any of this. This is why I say that social media is not like the best place to have uh, conversations that will result in organizing and change. Social media, I think, is how you introduce the idea to new people. And then hopefully those new people can find the organization that you're involved in and maybe they go to the website. You know what I mean? And then they see what's on the website and they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. I think I might want to get involved. And then they might reach out in that way. But there's no quick fix to this. We're not going to organize for a general strike to destroy capitalism on social media, on live streams, through live streams. We're not. That's not how it's done. We are going to have to get down in the trenches and talk to people. And not everyone can talk to every group of people. White leftists are going to have to do this organizing among a whole lot of their brethren communities, because we are not going to be welcomed or listened to in a lot of these communities. And we just need to realize that's the reality. So our white allies need to, and our comrades and accomplices, and let me change that, because we don't need allies right now. We need comrades and accomplices, right? So white folks, do your job. Go to your communities and organize your communities. Talk to them about these things. You have to be the go-between, because we've seen, history shows us how us organizing for better for all working class and poor people is met by too many white working class and poor people, right? So this is a great platform for introducing ideas, but as I see in the chat, it's also a great platform for confusing things, because I love Toni Morrison, but she did say what she said. She said she's not canceled. I'm just annoyed that that came from her, and really, I'm really annoyed that the idea that Bill Clinton playing saxophone badly on the Arsenio Hall show kind of qualified him as Black. That's the thing that pisses me off so much. Like, why is the bar so low for us to be identified with us? That's what I mean. So I don't know. I think that for all of us who are organizers, this particular holiday is bullshit. It always has been. If you know the history of this country to any degree, if you know the real history of this country, you know this holiday is bullshit. You know there's no freedom and no liberty. If you don't have the ability to acquire safe dwelling, if you don't have a job that pays you enough money to be able to afford such a dwelling, but you can't find a job that pays you enough money, and then when you do have a job, you have to work 2 or 3 of them in order to afford a piece of shit apartment to keep over your head, that's not safe, that's mold and rodent ridden, but that's the best you can do, because that's all you can make. And then the government comes and tells you that the SNAP benefits that you need to feed your children, because the 2 or 3 jobs you have don't give you enough money to keep a roof over your head and feed and clothe you and your children throughout the month for the whole 30 days. But your government comes and tells you that SNAP benefits are for lazy people, and people who don't work don't deserve SNAP benefits, and you can't appeal to anyone in your government to change their mind about the way they see a necessary lifeline that keeps you alive. Nobody in this government will listen to you when you tell them, no, we need these benefits. And you know what? The rent is too high. I work 3 jobs and I don't make $30,000 a year. I can't afford a better place to live. My kids are always sick because of the mold. The rats are biting my children. And I can't take them to the hospital because what? Sick leave. I don't have health insurance. And yeah, they're absent from school a lot because they're sick, because of all these other things. And there is nobody in this government that's supposed to be of the people, for the people, and by the people. There's nobody in this government that will listen to you and say, you know what? You're right. This is the richest country this world may have ever seen. And we can do better for you than this. You're right. This is terrible. Nobody in this country should be living like this. So let's make sure you can afford a decent place to live that's safe, that's free of environmental contaminants, so that you and your children can have a safe and healthy place to live. Let's raise your wages so that you don't have to work 3 jobs and be away from your family, so that you can make the little bit of money that you make to keep you from being homeless. Let's raise your wages so you don't have to work yourself to death into an early grave and be able to spend time with your children. And let's make sure all employers offer full benefits, health care, enough sick and vacation and paid time off, so that you can take care of these health issues, so that you can go to the doctor and not have to worry about a $500 copay that you don't have. Let's make sure the insurance industry doesn't exist anymore, and that the government pays for health care so that you don't have to go broke trying to get a tooth pulled, right? You're absolutely right. Let's make sure that your children go to a school that is fully funded, so that they can have the best equipment, learning the most accurate information, real history, information that will help them do better and build a better society and learn about the rest of the world and be good global citizens and be proud of their country and what they are building. Let's make sure we provide everybody in this country an equal footing, not because they come from a certain place, not because they come from a certain lineage, but because they are human beings. And all human beings need certain things to live. All human beings need dwelling to live in. All human beings need clean water and decent nutritious food to eat. All human beings need health care to live. Everybody's going to get sick at some point. Everybody. All human beings need a decent education, and children need a safe and flourishing environment where they are encouraged to explore and to learn to think for themselves, to grow their creativity. Yeah, let's as the government of the most powerful nation on the planet, let's make sure that everybody in our country has the basic things that every human being needs in order to survive, so that whatever anybody wants to do beyond that, they don't have to worry about those things. Those things are not going to be the reason, or them not having those things will not be the reason that those people fail, end up on the streets, and die an early death. If everybody has housing, everybody has health care, everybody has education, then everybody starts from the same place. Everybody starts from the same place. And then we have a society in which people can pursue whatever interests they want and do whatever they want beyond that. Yes, let's do that. Do we live in a country in which this government has that type of situation for you? No, you do not. But the very same government that refuses to provide these things for working class and poor Black people, for immigrants, for working class and poor white people, the very same government are bombing and destroying countries in which the governments do provide those things for their people. And then they turn around and tell you that the people from those countries who were forced to come here because the government is bombing the shit out of them and destroying their countries, overturning their democratically elected governments, taking away their social safety nets, and all of those policies that we just talked about that you wish you had. The same government is destroying those countries and taking those things away from those people. And now those people are forced to come here because they can't live in their countries anymore. And the very same government then tells you that it's the Negroes that are your problem, working class and poor white people. And then it tells us Black folks it's the immigrants that are your problem. And meanwhile, the people doing all of this to all of us are sitting there laughing all the way to the bank at us stabbing each other in the back. When what we should be doing is organizing, talking to each other, comparing our struggles, getting together, uniting, turning on them, the ruling class, and kicking their asses. That's what we should be doing. But that is not what we're doing, because too many of us has spent far too much time listening to people on social media who are not organizing at all, but they're just telling you the latest thing that the latest milk toast, reformist, liberal, Democrat light politician tells you is going to be the thing that makes everything better for everybody else. And that's what people focus on instead of actual revolution and the destruction of the capitalist system that is the enemy to all of us. So that is what we are facing right now. As this 4th of July is about to descend upon us tomorrow, this man, I guess, is supposed to be using, instead of the 20,000 or so fireworks that they usually set off every year, I've heard that he is planning on using 4 times as much fireworks, 80,000. I don't know if that's true or not, but I wouldn't put it past him. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I know it's going to sound like a war zone. And that's really horrifically ironic, because while y'all will be cooking out tomorrow and enjoying those fireworks that that sound like a war zone, bombs, real 200-ton bombs, 2,000-ton bombs, the biggest bombs that were ever dropped on anything since the last mother of all bombs was dropped on Syria, are being dropped on Lebanon right now. While you're going to be out tomorrow at your cookouts with the fireworks, the real fireworks being dropped from US planes and shot from US missiles will be dropped on Iran. In the Congo, the US and Israel are behind that. In Somalia, the US and Israel involved in that. In Venezuela, they are softening them up. The IOF, the Israeli occupation force, is in Venezuela with the US military from Southcom right now. Southcom, the same US military that shot missiles into Venezuela in the pre-dawn hours of January 3rd, killed 130 people, lied in US media and said nobody died, and kidnapped a democratically elected president and his wife and a National Assemblywoman from their beds in the middle of the night. The same bombs are being prepared to be dropped on Cuba just in case, while you all are going to be cooking out and enjoying your fireworks and oohing and ahhing at the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. There will be real bombs dropped on real people tomorrow, because those bombs are being dropped on those people today, and they've been being dropped on those people ever since this US empire has existed. So 4th of July, fuck you, July. Fuck you, 4th of July. Have a cookout if you want to. Have a cookout if you must. I would kind of prefer that you had it on Sunday and then call out of work on Monday. But I don't like telling people what to do. This battle of ideas has to be waged. And this is my way of contributing to the conversation, of raising the issues, of getting other people to come in and give insight into issues that are more precise. But this is a small, very, very small part of what needs to be done. Because when I turn these cameras off, I have to go and organize. And that's exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow. I will be at the Palestine House of Freedom for their community organizing event. That's the alternate 4th of July. I went to pick up the palm cards where we're talking about boycotting the World Cup, boycotting the US because of all of the things we just talked about on Darker Than Blue an hour and a half ago, and all of the things that we're talking about now. Do whatever it is you have to do, feel like you want to do, but you must organize. You must get off this thing and get out into the streets among the people and organize. Have these difficult, hard conversations and help people understand we are in this same struggle together. Because let me tell you something. Whatever you think is okay is being done to other people. They are coming for you. And if you don't see that by now, I don't know what to tell you. So that's all I got for today. Thank y'all. I hope I didn't piss anybody off too bad. I usually do. So let's see what is going on for the rest of this week. Thanks, Ricky, for this. There's a national mobilization against genocide in Atlanta tomorrow from 12 o'clock to 10 p.m. They're gonna be outside, so you need to be outside. As I said, go to, and I didn't know this. Thank you for whoever put it in the chat. The Palestinian House of Freedom here in Washington, D.C., Dar al Huria, has a YouTube page. So please go check out their YouTube page, Palestine House of Freedom. And next Saturday at my church, Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, we will be having the initial session of our very first public teach-in or public education series, and we will be talking about understanding capitalism. That will be next Saturday from from 2 to 5 at Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ. I will have the flyer for you on the Remix Morning Show on Wednesday, so you need to come back to YouTube, to Black Liberation Media on YouTube, Wednesday and Thursday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., and you'll get more information about that. But you see, when I turn this off, that's what I'm going to be doing. When you turn this off, my question for you is, what are you going to do? All right? Whatever you do, please be safe this weekend. Have a good weekend. Be careful. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.